Okay. So welcome everybody. We'll get rolling. Good morning. You grab sheets and we'll start. So I'll tell you what we're going to try to do in this three-part series um, is to understand a little bit about some of the history of northern Israel, particularly of some wars that were fought there. There are many wars that were fought there. I'm choosing one particular section because I was before the war began, before Melachim Simchat Torah started, I had been doing Navi every week, just going through in order. And it was a multi-year project. So here we are again, learning something in Navi. And like everything else, you're kind of starting the story in the middle. So I have to give you some background, both because it's been a long time for many of us to study Navi, study word from the words of the Navi, and also because I do want to state as a disclaimer, I'm not giving political commentary here on what's going on right now involving attacks on Israel from its enemies. I'm not a military strategist. I'm not a politician. I'm not pretending to be like running things in that regard. But I think there are certain lessons we can tease out and think about some themes that have to do with this region and with some of the geopolitics that we learn about already in the Navi that maybe inform some of our way of thinking from a religious perspective, spiritual perspective about some of the things that are happening. But I say again, if you're reading into it like, oh, Svi Engel thinks he's like, this is what Israel should do. Like, no, it's not none of that. It's not related to the topic at hand. Okay, so you're with me. Okay, so here's the background. I'm kind of giving this a thumbnail sketch in order to understand what is happening. Everybody knows the joke, which nobody laughs at anymore because it's so old. It's a guy on the desert island and his two shuls, no other people, and they find him, right? The shul I go to, the shul I don't go to, right? You know about that? So you know that the Jewish state did not last. The first time there's a Jewish kingdom, it didn't last more than 80 years. You know that, unfortunately, that's a reality. There were 40 years of King David and 40 years of King Shlomo. Prior to that, there was a king, King Shaul, who was the first king, who essentially was, you could say, the first king. It was more than 80 years, but his were wars of expansion and pacification, whatever you want to call it, whatever language you want to use, involving King Shaul. Then comes David, then comes Shlomo. There's a writer who wrote a book within the last few years. His name is Nathaniel Ellenson, and he wrote a book which it's not clear to me if Nasrallah Yamach Shemo V'Zichro read the book or didn't read the book, but this book basically says, he wrote it like maybe in 2020, 2021, this fellow Ellenson. He wrote basically, there's not been a united Jewish Commonwealth for more than about 8 decades in Jewish history, period. And we are approaching at that time when he wrote it, 75th year of the state of Israel. And look at the level of dissension that we're up to. That was before 2023 and the judicial reform and the whole thing, right? But I think on Tisha B'Av 2023, I shared an article that was in Jerusalem Post about a guy who had an idea. He wanted to divide the Jewish state into 2 Jewish states, the state of Israel and the state of Jerusalem. And the state of Israel would have Tel Aviv as its capital, and Jerusalem would have, right? So that's what prompted me on Shabbat Shuvah, right before October 7th, to give a talk about the 2 anthems from Tel Aviv, where I talked about 2 important prayers or themes or hymns or anthems that we have. They weren't prayers necessarily, but anthems that we have. One, Hatikva, and the other, Kaddish, both that came from Tel Aviv, which was originally not on the Mediterranean coast, but was actually in Babylonia and is featured in the book of Ezekiel, and Yechezkel describes that he's in Tel Aviv. So after the reign of King Shlomo, there was a split. It was Malchut Yisrael, Kingdom of Israel, and Malchut Yehuda, Kingdom of Judea. These 2, unfortunately, never got back together. Eventually, the 10 tribes get exiled. That's why they're called the Lost 10 Tribes. That's the Kingdom of Israel. The Kingdom of Judea endured until it was itself destroyed. The people exiled in and around the year 586 BCE. And those are the people from that group, not everyone, but from that group. Some Jews come back and build the second Jewish Commonwealth, which begins under very modest and humble circumstances. What we're learning today is into the time period of that split. And you have, the first thing is a chart on the right side, the kingdom of Israel. On the left side, the kingdom of Judea. I'm going to keep using the Hebrew terms moving forward, but you understand. So Malchut Yisrael, Malchut Yehuda. On the margins of this little chart, right and left, are the names of the Nevi'im, the prophets who were active at a given time. Okay, so active means that they're quoted in the verses in the psukim in the Navi itself. So we need to understand this background in order to understand the war that we'll be focusing on today, which is a war that transpired in the north. The time period when King Shlomo is the king centers around, let's say King David is around the year 1000 BCE. That's when he's already in Jerusalem. And he rules there about 33 years. He's seven and a half years in not in Shiloh, in Hebron. Thank you. And then he moves from Hebron to Yerushalayim for the following 30 to 32 and a half years. He reigns for 40 years. He dies. Shlomo takes over for 40 years. When Shlomo dies, his son Rechavam, left column in the red, takes over. And after a series of disastrous decisions, etc., having to do with, wouldn't you know, taxation, 10 tribes secede and make their own kingdom, and that's the birth of Malchut Yisrael. The birth of Malchut Yisrael, you should be aware, their secession, and this is what makes things so complicated, was not without a prophet named Achia Hashiloni, who happens to have also been the Rebbe of Eliyahu Navi, telling King Yeravam ben Nevat, the soon-to-be king, that he would become the king of most of the tribes, and that God would assent to this breakaway shul. Achia Shiloni, the Navi tells him this. Okay, so that makes for a very strange opening scene when you want to automatically sort of viscerally say, "Worth Malchut Yehuda, how dare you break away?" The prophet told Yeravam that it was from God, that there should be a split, that the kingdom of Shlomo in the Davidic reign should not continue for all the tribes, but only for a very few of them. And of course, only two tribes stay. Malchut Yehuda is comprised of the tribes of Yehuda and Binyamin. The tribe, not really a tribe, but I guess you call it the tribe of Levi, which doesn't have land. They're everywhere. They're mixed in with everybody. So there's tribe of Levi and Kohanim who are Malchut Yehuda, and those who are still Malchut Yisrael. What you need to know for today, there's a lot of history here, obviously, is you see the succession of kings, both in Malchut Yisrael and Malchut Yehuda, over a period of time. And what we're going to focus on today, and of course, this chart goes much, much farther. I just froze it here when you get to this person, Achav. On the right side in blue, you find Achav. The reason why it's color-coded, by the way, is when it's a dynasty. So there was a break in the original dynasty, Yehuda ben Nevat. There's a break, that's the green. Then there's two people who reign in gray. They're sort of superimposed in the right-hand column. You see it there? And on the in blue, that's already a dynasty. Omri, his son Achav, Achazyahu, and so on and so forth. Yeah. On the right side, that remained a dynasty throughout. Rechavam, Aviyah, Asa, Yehoshaphat, Yehoram. So that's the first thing to know. Okay. I'm at the left side of the column, still on the right side of the page, but the left column. Sorry. Okay. Now, what we'll do is I want to get a sense of what's happening in the relationship between the Jewish people and their neighbors to the north. Their neighbors to the north are predominantly the power brokers, seem to be in various, they're not empires as of yet, but they are chieftains who very often make coalitions with other chieftains. You'll have an example of that in this week's Parsha, right? The war of the 4 kings versus the 5 kings is really a world war because it's a coalition of kings who are very, very strong. 4 kings who come from Mesopotamia, travel overland, and actually come from the north to go south to conquer the 5 kings, a constellation of 5 kings who live in the vicinity of the Dead Sea. We call today the Dead Sea, Yam Melach, yeah, Salt Sea. So the first thing that we'll do is just to look into a few verses, few psukim, as sort of a lead up to understand who this nation was, the nation of Aram, sometimes called Aram Tzova. They're related to each other. So it's getting out of the sun. I had a feeling. So look at Shmuel Alef, Perek 14, right? Chapter 14, verse 47. You can find it on page 342 in this Koren Tanakh. So this describes the work of Shaul. All of these people, I'm going to head out on a limb and say, all of these people who served as kings, all of them, Shaul, David, Shlomo, Rechavam, Yeravam, they're all complicated people. They're all complicated people. Some are righteous, some are wicked, but that's in the aggregate. None of them has the status of being a malach, through and through. It's politics, it's war, it's messy, it's whatever it is. It's moral failing at times and the like, and the question of who gets up after and who doesn't. So on page 342, verse 47, right? So I can read from 46. The Philistines, who predominantly lived on the coast in such cities as Azza and Ashdod and Ashkelon. That was one thing. They had wars there. That's for the south. Page 342, chapter 14 of 1 Samuel, Shmuel Alef, verse 46. 342. What was I saying? 342, page 342 in the Koren Tanakh. So Shaul went after the Plishtim. That gives you a verse over there. V'Shaul lachadam lucha al Yisrael. Right? He took the kingdom upon Israel. He united them essentially. Vayilachem saviv b'chol oivav. He fought all the 7 fronts, if you could call it that, of the ancient Near East. B'Moab uvnei Ammon, there to the east of Israel. Uve Edom, there to the southeast of Israel. Uve Malchet Tzova, that's Tzova. Where's that? In the north. That's what becomes soon Aram. Uva Plishtim, v'chol she'yifnei Yarshia. All of them. Anyone who wherever he turned the army, they were successful at quelling these neighbors. I mean, again, does it sound familiar? Yeah, it turns out it's an ongoing process. He warred against Amalek. He saved the Jewish people from the one who wanted to trample on the Jewish people. Sad to say, in the end, there's that sin that he has with Amalek. We'll come back to that, not today, but it'll be germane for something we're going to see. So that's already a tussle that's taking place. Okay. Now, before the time of Shaul, there is the period of the Shoftim. It's a dissolute time. There isn't a united leadership. It's you could say lahavdol. It's 12 cantons or states, and each state has its own leader, and the leaders at various times become leaders of more tribes, but it's very tribal. There's no national sense of the national. It's very much it's supposed to be a sense of the national, but it doesn't pan out that way. So if you go to the next source, Shmuel Bet, when his successor David comes around, King David in Samuel 2 Samuel, chapter 8, pasuk chet. It's on page 374. We learn again about David's wars. Chapter 8 in Shmuel Bet, again 374 on the bottom. He was the same thing, about him fighting different wars against this one, against that one. We don't have time to see all these psukim inside, but look at verse, should be verse 5. I think I wrote 6, but it should be verse 5. Vatavo Aram Damasek Lazor Lahadad Ezer Melech Tzova Vayach David Ba'aram Esim Shnaim Elef Ish. David strikes down 22,000 of their soldiers who came together. Aram Damasek came to help Hadad Ezer, who was the king of Tzova. Damasek is today Damascus, the same place. Old Damascus, just like Jerusalem's the same Damascus. And there's this area of Tzova, right there. It's basically in the very close vicinity to Damascus. In fact, the two of them are fused. It's almost like a suburb, which is why, if you've ever heard of the very famous codex that came from Aleppo, the Aleppo Codex is also called Keter Aram Tzova, Aram-Tzova, because that's the place that it's from. Okay, now it's a little farther north. The truth is, it's not exactly a suburb, but it's Tzova, Aram Tzova, a little farther north. But that's he slays them. Okay, a little further along here. Where is it? Same chapter, verse should be verse 13, right? 12 and 13. He mentions it again. Me Aram umi Moab minabon plishnim malek umishlal hadad ezer ben rechov melech tzova. describes that he had all sorts of spoils of war that he took, that he kept, but not, that he brought back from all these places. He actually sanctified, he consecrated them. He didn't keep them. In fact, I should have started verse 9, because you have in chapter 8 here, it keeps going, right? This one heard, that one heard how David destroyed. There was deterrence. So this one makes a covenant with David. He doesn't want a war with him, right? He gives him all sorts of things, and all the wealth David puts aside. Verse 13, Vayaz David Shem b'shuvo me'akotod Aram became Melach Shmona Sar Alef. Right, so he's setting himself up various monuments and different things. Right, they put him a name for him as such. Yeah, to understand this is to understand that multi-generational wars were happening with these people, the people who lived to the north. It wasn't the first round in the war toward the end of Melachim Alef. In Melachim Alef, Book of Kings. So again, the Book of Kings, the Book of Samuel is the story of King Shaul, King David, at the end of it, and then by the time you get to the Book of Kings, Melachim Alef, that's already the transition to Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, Shlomo, and then the split happens in the time of his children. So if you look at his child, in chapter 15 in Melachim Alef, sorry, it went too far, too fast. Chapter 11 first, yeah. Parak Yud Aleph, Pasuk Chaf Bet, Chav Gimel. Okay, Chav Gimel, page 420, 420. So it describes that, unfortunately, because of various things that Shlomo did, God allowed the enemies of the Jewish people to start kicking up a fuss. That's a very glib way of saying it. That suddenly the nations that were held down, that were deterred, suddenly started to raise hackles against the Jewish people. And among them is a story I don't have time to tell you the whole story now. We learned it a while ago, but it has to do with, in verse 23, that God brought an obstacle against Shlomo. Vayakem, it's on page 420 toward the bottom. Vayakem Elokim lo Satanet Rizon ben Eliada asher barach me'ed Hadad Ezer melech Tzova Adonav vayikbotz lav anashim vayhisar gedud v'harog David otam vayilchu Damasek vayishlo yimilchu b'Damasek vayisatan li'Yisrael kol yimei Shlomo v'dorah asher Hadad vayakatz b'Yisrael vayimloch al Aram. All right, so essentially, in the time of Shlomo already, there were attacks coming from the north. Cross-border fedayin, you could say, mortar shelling, whatever you want to say. It was not a major assault, but it was constantly coming after the Jewish people. It didn't let them alone in the time of Shlomo. Yeah. Now, why did it happen? According to the Navi, it happened because Shlomo had certain failings in his effort to be as wise as he was and as open as he was. There were certain failings that happened, personal and national. So now, bring the Jewish people back online. As it were, God allows the other nations to start deciding, hey, we're gonna be a satan, means an obstacle for the Jewish people. Yeah, you with me so far? Okay, so that's in the time of Shlomo. Then comes the next piece, which is something I actually spoke about a little bit this year. Chapter 15, page 427. This is really a huge tragedy. I don't have any other word for it, because it has to do with Jews fighting Jews. A few times, more than zero. Yeah, right. But back in the day, it was much worse, and so you have to. The perspective is on one level sobering, but another level it's cautionary, and should also allow us to celebrate every moment that doesn't happen today. But Malchut Yehuda and Malchut Yisrael got into various wars with each other, civil wars. It's a fact. So there's no other way to say it. It seems unfathomable to us. How could it be? But we live after a lot of Jewish tears and blood. And you would say, well, they did too. But people forget what's at stake. Sometimes around 80 years after. So here's the thing. It's a whole long story, but basically King Asa and King Baasha got into a war. And the description here of what happened is that Basha, King Basha of Yisrael, which is also called the Northern Kingdom, decided that on the border between the kingdom of Yisrael and the kingdom of Yehuda, he's going to start building things up, i.e., he's going to start encroaching on the land of Yehuda, presumably with an eye towards taking it. It's not clear. So Asa, because he didn't know what else to do, decided to do something really, really unfortunate. And that's what we learn here, the story on page 427. But it's going to be the backdrop of the battle that we'll see inside. And we'll actually just stay there and learn the parak. So it goes like this, verse 16. They warred against each other the entire time. Vayal Basha melech Yisrael al Yehuda, v'ivin harama levilti tate yotzei vava le'asa melech Yehuda. He put a barrier so that no one could go to Malchut Yehuda, but he started building it up. So now look what happened next. This was a big problem. Verse 18. Vayikach Asa et kol hakesef v'hazahav hanotarim ve'otzrot beit Hashem ve'otzrot beit hamelech vayitnem b'yad avadav vayishlachem hamelech Asa el ben Hadad ben Tavrimon ben Chezyon melech Aram hayoshev v'domesek lemor. Asa took all of the remaining valuables that existed in Yerushalayim, and he had them sent to the king of Damascus, the Aramean king. What did he say? Brit beini uveinecha, bein avi uvein avicha, hine shalachti lecha shochad, kesef zahav, lech hafeira et britcha et basha melech Yisrael v'yala me'alai. I'm giving you a lot of money. Break your covenant that you, the king of Aram, have with Basha, king of Israel, and make an alliance with me. Help me get rid of Basha from my borders. How do you get rid of a guy from your borders? Simple. You attack him from the other side, and he has to divert his energy and his forces. Vayishma ben Hadad el hamelech Asa vayishlach et sarei hachayalim asher lo al arei Yisrael vayach et Iyon ve'edan ve'et Avel beit Ma'acha ve'et kol kinrot al kol eretz Naftali. So that was it. He attacked and took over all sorts of cities. He stopped what he was doing and he stayed instead in the city of Tirza. Etc. He built, so Asa took over that spot and he built it up for himself. Now look at the map on this sheet. And you'll have the story of the ancient Near East. Superimposed over the map is the contemporary map. So it's today's political map. But if you look carefully at the map, and I'll show you where to find them, you'll find various flags of the biblical places. So on the right-hand side of this map, you have Damascus. There's a little like greenish, yellowish kind of a picture, a little flag that you see it. It's Damascus. Damascus, it says so. Yeah. Under it says Daraya in Latin script. You with me? So if you're with me, right-hand side of the map. Now, if you scan your eye to the left side of the map, that little blue in the top left-hand corner, that's the Mediterranean. And you're looking here at Lebanon. Or the border between Lebanon and the state of Israel. Yeah? So, if you look at Mount Hermon, you can see it there. So that's the same Mount Hermon, obviously. That is today what we call the Golan Heights. Yeah, in that area. In fact, the dotted line that you see there, there are two dotted lines. So, pardon?
That's the border.
That's the demilitarized zone, and the border is on the border is on either side of that. So there's a DMZ supposed to be in between those two.
I see Katsrin in the bottom.
Exactly. You can see Majdel Shams near where it says 98, Route 98, in the smack dab in the middle. Okay. See Majdal Shams? Yeah. And if you look a little farther north, that's Sheba Farms, aka Hardov. Okay. Majdal Shams is where the 12 boys Nebuch playing soccer were killed by Hezbollah, were murdered by Hezbollah rocket. That's how close it all is. Now from Sheba Farms, look to the left. You'll see a place there called Iyun. In Iyun has another name today, Marj Alayun. Or Marjayun. If you're familiar with some of the battles that took place in Lebanon, Marjayun is considered one of the big places where there was a battle. South, so that was one of the places that was controlled by by Malchut Yisrael, captured by Malchut Aram. South of there, you have Avel Beit Ma'acha, right near Dan, and a place called Dan, right? And Laish and Ma'acha, all those places, a little blue flag and a little green. You can't see it that well, but if you look a little below that, you'll see the place called Kiryat Shmona, just north of Kiryat Shmona. That's where these places were. That's the biblical locations. That's what was taken by the Syrian Aramean forces. Not Syrian, Assyrian, but I mean from the territory that we call today Syria. Assyria is not yet. This is Aram, like Arameans, like Aramaic. So they captured this in the north. Katsrina is at the south. Sfat is at the bottom of the map. It gives you a sense of what's happening, yeah? So the enemy showed up, and unfortunately it was because they were paid off by the southern kingdom, by Malchut Yehuda, to take over these places. Now we need to understand this and to have this in mind in order to now go, with the remaining time for today, to open the discussion about this war in the north that happened. And it's an important war because this one gets a lot of play. It's not just like two psukim, but the whole interaction between the Jewish king, the king of Israel, and the king of Aram is going to be part of the dialogue. But it gives you just a sense of what's happening. Yeah. Okay. You with me? Questions, comments? So far, so good. Okay. So look now at page 434. And we're all getting to the story like in the middle. Ben Hadad Melech Aram is verse of page 434, chapter 20. So Ben Hadad, Melech Aram, what does he do? Kavatz et kol chelo. By the way, if you don't know how many years it was after that story, you just look over here. Malchut Yisrael. They had where Basha was 24 years, where he overlapped with Asa. So somewhere in there was that war. Now we're dealing with some decades later, the time of Achav, for the end of Achav's reign that this happens. And we learned that he gathered Kavatz et kol chelo u'shloshim u'shnayim melech ito v'zeracha vayal vayatzar al Shomron vayilachem ba. Ben Hadad came from Aram. He gathered 32 kings. They came with their armies. Sus v'rechav, they have their armor. They're traveling with their tanks. They got their horses and the chariots. And they placed a siege on Shomron, and they war against it. Now, turn the page in the source sheets. There's another map on page 2 on the back. And you can see it's written in English, Shomron. You can see it right there. It's just to the east of Herzliya, where my family is, my son, Netanya, where my family is, maybe your family. Just northeast of Tel Aviv, Yafo of today. Yeah. Right around the vicinity of Shechem, there's a town called Shomron. In the vicinity, the area that today we call Samaria, the Shomron. So now, if you're watching this map, and you remember the map we just saw a minute ago, on this little map, scan your eye up to find the Kinneret. If you look farther north, straight up from the Kinneret, you come and get the Kiryat Shmona, and you remind yourself, wow, wait a second. In the time of Basha, they were all the way up there. They already conquered territory of Malchut Yisrael, which was never recouped. But now they were able to get all the way down to Shomron. It shows you how weak the Jewish army was in Malchut Yisrael, that he came with a massive force, 32 kings. I'm not suggesting they were all superpowers. The point is they banded together, and in a coalition, small groups that banded together became a very large group. With their, you could say, wall of fire, they come down, and they lay siege to Shomron. Pasuk bet. Vayishlach Malachim el Achav melech Yisrael ha'ira. Vayomer lo ko amar ben Hadad kaspecha uzahavcha lihu v'nashacha uvanecha tovim lihem. So he sends messengers to Achav. What does he say? Your gold and your silver belong to me, and your wives and your children, the best among them, they are mine. Vayan melech Yisrael vayomer kidvarcha Adoni hamelech lechani v'chol asher li. Achav called Melech Yisrael almost throughout this whole story, says to Ben Hadad, yes, I listen to you, my master, the king of Israel. That's what he says to another king. I and everything that belong to me are yours. you own them. Yeah, that's quite something. Doesn't end there. Vayashuvu Melachim v'yomru, Ko amar ben Hadad limor, ki shalachti eilecha limor, kaspecha uzahavcha v'nashecha uvenecha lititain. So this messengers come back again, and they say, this is what Ben Hadad said. Ben Hadad said to tell you, your gold and your silver and your gold and your wives and your children, give to me. Ki im ka'et machar, eshlach et avadai eilecha v'chipsu et beitecha ve'et batei avadecha v'haya kol machmareinecha yasimu v'yadam v'lakachu. So tomorrow at this time, I'm sending a group. What is their job going to be? They'll search through your whole house and your servants' houses, and they'll take everything that is precious before your eyes, and they will take in their hands, and they will take it away. Captivity. So now, what's the difference between the first time he sent the emissaries and the second time? How come the first time he was so submissive, and this time he's like clarifying what it is? So it was the Malbim's question. The Malbim here in the inset on page 2. Hashelot. My avdel ben shtei shlichut. Right? What do you say? Tomorrow I'm sending my servants. What's the difference? You're going to get everything the next day anyway. Why is there a doubling of the language to come to in a minute? Why is there a doubling of what he said? What's the doubling that we're talking about here? So before we get to the answer, we have to see actually what happened in the Navi. We didn't read enough psukim apparently. Look at the next pasuk. I'm at verse 7. I'm sorry, verse 7, page 434, verse 7. Vayikra melech Yisrael l'chol ziknei haaretz vayomer de'una ureu ki ra'a ze mevakesh. Ki shalach elai lenashai ulevanai ulechaspi ulezahavi v'lo anati mimenu. I'm telling you something very evil happened. He's now speaking to who? To the elders of Israel, the sages, something like that, or the people who were there. And he says, look what he's trying to do. He repeats what happened. I didn't prevent him when he said that. Vayomer elah, but they responded to him, Kol zikinim v'chol ha'am, al tishma v'lo toveh. Don't listen, don't agree. He just said, it's not going to happen. Vayomer l'malachei ben Hadad, Imrula Adoni HaMelech, still speaking a submissive language, but the statement goes back to the emissaries, go tell my master, the king, meaning king of Aram, what you told me the first time, I will do. But send it back to him. The second request that you made, I'm just not going to be able to accede to. So, Rashi, Malbim writes, there are two senses in which when someone says they belong to me, they could mean. Meaning I own them. That doesn't mean literally he's going to take them. It means they're going to be under his subjugation. You'll be citizens of the Aramean Empire. Could also be interpreted, however, that even those initial words, which is exactly what he clarifies after the fact, I didn't mean they belong to me in the sense that you're going to pay me money and taxes, a head tax for every person because they're my subjects, and you have to listen to what I say. I meant I'm literally going to take them away. Subjugation. But why did he specify? He could have just said to Achav, everything that's there belongs to me. Good enough. Why did he get into specifics? Obviously, everyone's going to be his servants. Right? So he wants to take everything. For now, he's going to take the best, the choicest of the women and the kids, but he'll come for everything else later. The second time he tells them, no, I'm clarifying. I didn't mean just in some ethereal sense, you're subjects of my court. And this is a turning point. This is a turning point. On the level of pshat, what happened happened. It's exactly what happened. Chazal understand a deeper layer of interaction, what's happening here, because they noticed that there was something strange about the way that this request came. It was specific, but in the specificity, already in verse 6, he mentioned kol machmad einecha, everything that's precious in your eyes. In addition to saying, I'm going to take everything that I spoke about before, that all that is precious. So on the level of pshat, literally, precious is his gold, his silver, his people, his family, etc. Yeah, but the Gemara understood a lower, a deeper layer of meaning here. What's that? So the Gemara opens by talking about Achav's father, Omri. Omri and Achav, both of them were essentially wicked. Essentially, they did a lot of wicked things. But Amar Rabbi Yochanan mipnei ma zacha Omri lamalchut, says the Gemara, the translation here, courtesy of Cincino, open source online. Why did he get to be the king? He built a city. What was that city? It's called Shomron. Shenemar vayiken et ahar Shomron me'et shemer bekikarim kesef vayiven et ahar vayikra et shem ha'ir asher bana al shem shemer adoni hahar Shomron. That's why there's a town called Shomron. It becomes the capital city of the Jewish people's kingdom of Israel. So Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Why did Achav get to be the king for 22 years? He was so wicked. He did so many wicked things, which we're not focusing on right now. I told you that everybody's complicated. He did a lot of wicked things, idolatry and terrible things. The Gemara says, because he honored the Torah, which was given in 22 letters. Now, it doesn't mean literally he got 22 because it's 22 letters. It means to understand what's the significance of number 22. There's 22 letters in the Alef, and the Torah is given with 22 letters. But the point is, he did something to honor the Torah. Shenemar, as it says, we just read this a moment ago. Vayishlach malachim elachav melech Yisrael ha'ira vayomer lo go amar ben hadad kaspacha v'zavecha lihu v'nashecha v'nacho tovim liheim, etc. Ki im ka'et machar ishlach et avadai elacha v'chipsu et beitecha v'et batei avadecha vayakum machmar einecha yasimu v'yadam v'lakchu vayomer l'malachei ben hadad amru Imru ladoni Hamelach kol shalachta el avdecha v'rishana eseba devar zelu chalasot. My machmar einecha. What is the precious thing that was in Achav's eyes, according to the Gemara? Not the pshat, but on the level of medrash. Lav Sefer Torah. Isn't the precious thing in his eyes the Sefer Torah? The Gemara says no. Dilma avodah zarah. The precious thing in his eyes was idolatry. After all, also an idolatrous king. The Gemara says lo sal kadaitach. No. You know why? They told him, they told him that all the elders told him, don't listen. That must have meant because that was the difference. The second time, the call was for the Torah itself, the Sefer Torah. He said, I'm not giving you our Torah. I have to understand what this means because it's a little bit strange. Like, wouldn't it be enough the women and children? Would you wait the Torah? That was the breaking point? They told him no. So the Gemara says, well, maybe these are the shamefaced elders, meaning elders who are wicked. They're the council people, but they're bad. We have a case history with this. Avshalom, son of David, when he rebels, he has his own retinue of elders. So he also said elders. Maybe they were wicked. No, so the Gemara says, and Rav Yosef said over there, Savi the Vahata. So no, the Gemara says, no, the difference is, Hatam lo k'tiv v'chol ha'am, ha'k'tiv v'chol ha'am, the whole nation. The Yavsar, the lohavu behon tzadikei. Some of those people in the nation and the elders who were there must have been righteous. Uchtiv, as it says previously, in one of the wicked moments of Achav and his very wicked wife, Jezebel, because of what they had done, Eliyahu Hanavi is told by Hashem, V'ishat v'yisel shivat alafim kol ha'birkayim asher lo kar'u labal kol ha'peshali nashaklo. He's going to leave in the end 7,000 people alive. The only 7,000 people who haven't bowed down to the idols. That's a previous parak. God says this to Eliyahu Hanavi. All to say, somehow here, the Sefer Torah, according to the Gemara at least, is like the breaking point for Achav. It's a bit strange, no? But now he cared. Now he cared. He didn't care before. Unless we understand a little bit of a deeper level, that Achav is a very conflicted person. He's Jewish. He's the king of Israel. He knows all the trappings of what it means to be a king, a Jewish king. And he also knows that he's married to a woman who, by the by, heralded from the northern kingdoms, which today would be Lebanon, from Tzor of Sidon. She brought a terrible idolatrous culture with her, and she installed it. Achav went along with it. He was a dutiful husband, maybe, but maybe he was more than dutiful. Maybe he was complicit and more than complicit. Somewhere in all of this, there were glimmers of this earlier also in chapters we're not learning today. Achav is caught between the seductions of his wife and her idolatrous culture. And on the other side, he has interactions with Eliyahu Hanavi. He has interactions with other prophets. He knows the right way. And it turns out that sometimes even someone who may be very far away from Judaism, when the enemy shows up and says, and I also want your Torah, the lights turn on. I said, I'm not giving you that. I'm willing to die for that. What about everything else that you're not doing the right way? Yeah, but it's different now. It's coming for the Torah. One of the commentators, I think it's Rav Elchanan Samet, who's one of the great Parshanei HaMikra of our time in terms of Tanakh studies. He lives in the area of the Gush. I think he was the one who wrote this, one of his essays about this. He said, even Achav knew there was a Parsha of the king. The Parsha of the king section in the Torah that says, don't have too many wives, don't have too many armaments, and make sure you write yourself a Sefer Torah. So maybe he thought, I have a lot of wives. I don't care about the Torah generally because I have a lot of horses and stuff. But now that the enemy is at the door, he wants to take, what does it mean, the Sefer Torah? The Sefer Torah that I was commanded to write is the king of Israel, which of course, I went to the ceremony where they had the Achmas Sefer Torah. Of course, I have this Torah somewhere put away because without that, I have no legitimacy as being the true king. So I needed that. But that's what he wants now? No, I'm not going to let him have it. I'm going to ask the people, what should we do? And of course, they're going to tell me, sire, we will never give that away. Now, again, on the level of Pshat, what made the headlines, what's in the book, didn't mention anything about Torah. It's that they wanted to take the women and the children. That was enough. But somewhere in this, Chazal want us to understand that this person, Achav, there was like a stirring inside of him of like, maybe I can still hold on to something here. If I'll just make this announcement, over the Torah, we go to war. That's a good slogan. Yeah. For the Torah, we go to now.
Because he didn't consult the first time.
Right. Totally capitulated. Like it's not about God, about religion, about consulting even, like it's over. He sees 32 kingdoms with their horses, their chariots. There's thousands and thousands of these soldiers. We'll learn the number shortly. And they're all arrayed right outside Shomron. I'm not in a position to bargain. So we'll pay you whatever you want. Just let us live. Yeah. In closing, we'll have to see this more in depth next time. That's all I have time for today. But Ben Hadad doesn't take that lying down, and Ben Hadad says to him, very, very terrible fighting words. Verse 10, Vayishlach elav Ben Hadad, we'll close with this, Vayomer ko yasun li Elohim v'cho yosifu im yispok afar Shomron lishe'alim l'chol ha'am asher baraglav. Basically, I just want you to realize, and the word Elohim here is not God's name, yeah? Elohim means the gods, the powers that I believe in, right? It's interchangeable. We talked about that actually in another context in this very room. There won't be enough dust left for all of the number of boots that are going to show up in Shomron. The whole thing, we're not only take everything that's there, we're taking everything. You're not going to have anything left. We'll obliterate you. We'll annihilate you. All the things that we hear, the imprecations, lo aleinu, from enemies from the north, they knew how to say it in the olden days too. And he doesn't have much much wherewithal for how he could win this war. He's totally outgunned, outmanned. But the one glimmer, and Chazal are seizing on this, you know why he got to rule for 22 years? Because at the end of all things, he gave honor to the Torah. That's the whole honor. Over the honor of the Torah, he said, that I can't part with. We can't live without the Torah. The question was, could he live with the Torah? The answer generally seemed to have been no. But when it came to live without the Torah, so we'll gather next week and we'll see what happens. Surprising turns and twists and turns in this. Okay. Odd comment today. Thanks for coming, everybody. Have a great rest of the day.